What started as a quiet conversation behind the walls of Kensington Palace was never supposed to reach the public. Palace aides dismissed it as routine, and officials worked quickly to keep attention away from it. But when Princess Catherine stepped out of that private meeting, the expression on her face told a very different story. She looked calm on the outside, yet something about her demeanor suggested that a serious concern had just unfolded. And according to growing whispers inside royal circles, it all centered around Princess Charlotte. At first, many believed it was simply another rumor destined to disappear. But as more details slowly surfaced, what seemed like harmless speculation began turning into one of the most talked about mysteries inside the royal family. People who normally refused to comment suddenly became unusually quiet, leaving many to wonder what was really happening behind palace doors. Before we uncover how this unexpected situation became connected to a hidden document reportedly left behind by Queen Elizabeth, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest royal updates. For several weeks, quiet rumors continued circulating among those closest to the monarchy. Every time they appeared, they were quickly dismissed by official voices insisting that everything was completely normal. Public engagements went ahead as scheduled. Royal appearances looked carefully organized. Every statement released by the palace sounded reassuring. But behind those polished appearances, insiders claim a different atmosphere was beginning to take shape. According to multiple reports, an urgent private meeting was arranged involving Prince William, Princess Catherine, and a small group of trusted medical specialists. While confidential meetings are not uncommon within the royal household, this one reportedly stood out because of the extraordinary level of privacy surrounding it. Access to the meeting was tightly restricted. Only a handful of people were allowed inside, while even experienced palace staff were reportedly kept away from the discussions. Shortly afterward, employees were quietly reminded not to speak about the gathering with anyone. Rather than calming speculation, the silence only made people more curious. Those who had worked inside the palace for years later described the atmosphere as noticeably different. Conversations became cautious. Staff reportedly stopped talking whenever certain topics were mentioned, and routine communication suddenly felt far more guarded than usual. It was as if everyone understood that something important had happened, but no one was willing to say it out loud. The concern only intensified when Princess Catherine was seen leaving the private meeting. Witnesses described her as composed but visibly thoughtful, carrying an expression that suggested she had just received deeply unsettling news. She never spoke publicly about the meeting, but for many royal observers, that single moment became the strongest indication that the rumors might hold more truth than anyone expected. Later that evening, attention quietly shifted toward Prince William. Sources claim the future king spent private time with Princess Charlotte, away from cameras and public view. There was no official explanation, no statement from Kensington Palace, and no attempt to clarify why. Yet for many watching closely, the image of William focusing entirely on his daughter raised even more questions. If the reports were accurate, whatever had been discussed behind closed doors was serious enough to demand his immediate attention. But as concern over Charlotte continued growing, an entirely different mystery was quietly beginning to unfold, one that stretched back to Queen Elizabeth herself and a secret reportedly hidden for years inside the royal archives. As concern surrounding Princess Charlotte quietly spread, another unexpected discovery was reportedly unfolding far away from the medical discussions. Deep inside the royal archives, among Queen Elizabeth's private collection of papers, staff allegedly came across something no one had anticipated. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than another sealed record stored alongside countless historical documents. But once its markings were examined more closely, the atmosphere reportedly changed almost immediately. The envelope carried one name: William. According to insiders, it was a sealed document prepared years earlier and connected directly to the future king. Suddenly, what had begun as worries over Charlotte appeared linked to something much older, something Queen Elizabeth had deliberately preserved long before the current generation faced today's challenges. Almost instantly, questions began spreading throughout palace circles. Why had the document remained hidden for so many years? Who knew it even existed? And perhaps the biggest mystery of all, why had it surfaced during one of the most sensitive periods the royal family had experienced in recent memory? What initially looked like an ordinary archival discovery quickly became something far more significant. For decades, Queen Elizabeth's personal papers had been protected under strict procedures. Very few people were ever granted access, and every item was carefully catalogued. According to individuals familiar with royal protocol, finding an overlooked file inside such a tightly controlled collection was considered highly unusual. That alone was enough to raise eyebrows. People closest to the late Queen often described her as someone who planned years, sometimes even decades, ahead. She rarely acted without purpose, especially when it involved the future of the monarchy. Long before challenges appeared in public, she was said to have quietly prepared guidance for those who would eventually inherit the crown. That reputation suddenly gave this newly discovered file far greater importance. Reports circulating within royal circles suggested the document had never been intended for public release. It wasn't written for historians, government officials, or palace advisors. It was reportedly prepared for Prince William alone. If those reports were accurate, it meant Queen Elizabeth had chosen to leave behind something deeply personal, something she believed should only reach her grandson when the moment was right. Naturally, speculation intensified. Why had she kept it hidden for so long? Why had almost no one spoken about it after her passing? And why had knowledge of its existence allegedly been limited to only a trusted handful of advisors? As more whispers emerged, palace observers began connecting the dots. Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth frequently left written notes, reflections, and guidance for future generations. Most remained private and routine. But according to insiders, this particular document belonged in a completely different category. It was reportedly placed under exceptional protection with instructions that it should remain sealed until very specific circumstances had been met. The implications were enormous. If the file truly focused on William's future, then it likely reached far beyond ordinary family matters. It may have addressed the monarchy itself, the responsibilities awaiting the future king, and the difficult decisions Queen Elizabeth believed would eventually arrive. Inside palace walls, the discovery quickly became more than a historical curiosity. It became a matter of extreme sensitivity. Sources claim additional precautions were quietly introduced around certain royal records, while access to sections of the archives became even more restricted. No official announcement was ever made, but behind closed doors, officials reportedly understood that the document had the potential to reshape important conversations. Because once news of its existence began circulating, a new concern emerged. What if someone other than William managed to see what Queen Elizabeth had intended only for him? That single question transformed the forgotten file into one of the monarchy's most closely guarded mysteries. As whispers continued spreading through royal circles, one question refused to disappear. Why had Queen Elizabeth gone to such extraordinary lengths to keep this document hidden? According to individuals familiar with palace procedures, the answer had little to do with secrecy for its own sake. The document was reportedly never intended for public attention. More importantly, insiders claimed it was meant to reach only one person: Prince William. As officials quietly reviewed the circumstances surrounding the sealed file, a clearer picture slowly began to emerge. Every precaution surrounding the document appeared to have been carefully planned years in advance. Nothing suggested coincidence. Every safeguard pointed toward a deliberate decision made by the late Queen herself. That realization immediately changed the narrative. This was no longer simply a forgotten paper discovered inside the archives. It became the story of a monarch who had spent a lifetime protecting the crown, and who may have prepared one final message for the future king before her passing. Sources close to royal observers claim the file carried unusually strict instructions regarding access. Although no official confirmation has ever been released, palace insiders believe Queen Elizabeth wanted the document delivered directly to William when the proper time arrived. Not to palace committees. Not to senior advisors. Not to the wider royal family. Only to William. That detail alone fueled endless speculation. Why had the Queen placed so much trust in her grandson? What did she believe was important enough to protect beyond her own lifetime? Those who knew Elizabeth personally often described her as someone who never thought only about the present. Every major decision was measured against the future stability of the monarchy. Political storms came and went, family disagreements made headlines, and public opinion constantly shifted, but her focus remained remarkably consistent. Protect the institution. Prepare the next generation. Leave it stronger than you found it. Many insiders now believe that same philosophy shaped the mysterious document. As discussions continued, attention shifted toward the royal archives themselves. Individuals responsible for preserving Queen Elizabeth's private records were reportedly known to follow exceptionally strict procedures. Certain collections were accessible only to a very limited group of trusted officials. Some files were catalogued separately, while others remained known to only a handful of people inside the institution. According to palace observers, the goal was never secrecy for its own sake. It was protection. Protection from misunderstanding. Protection from premature exposure. And protection from anyone reading sensitive material before the appropriate moment. But following Queen Elizabeth's passing, the atmosphere inside the monarchy gradually began changing. New leadership brought new priorities. Different personalities stepped into more influential roles. Relationships inside the institution continued evolving, creating subtle shifts that many long-time palace observers quietly noticed. Among those whose influence appeared to grow significantly was Queen Camilla. Her public responsibilities expanded. Her role became increasingly visible. And according to some royal commentators, her position within the institution became stronger than ever before. Not everyone viewed those changes the same way. Some traditional royal insiders reportedly became increasingly protective of Queen Elizabeth's legacy. Their concerns weren't necessarily about ceremonies or public appearances, but about influence behind palace walls. Who had access? Who shaped important conversations? And who would help guide the monarchy into its next chapter? As news of the hidden document quietly spread, those concerns only intensified. Soon, an uncomfortable question began circulating behind closed doors. Had anyone tried to learn about the file before it unexpectedly resurfaced? No public evidence has ever confirmed those rumors. But inside palace circles, the question itself revealed just how sensitive the situation had become. Conversations reportedly became more cautious. Trust became harder to measure. And with every new rumor surrounding the sealed document, the mystery only grew deeper. If Queen Elizabeth had protected it so carefully, what was she trying to prevent? And if William alone was meant to receive it, what responsibility had she quietly placed into the hands of Britain's future king? What had started as a quiet archival discovery was now becoming something much larger. Behind palace walls, the existence of Queen Elizabeth's sealed document was reportedly creating a level of concern few had expected. According to individuals familiar with royal procedures, the issue was no longer the document itself, it was the growing number of questions surrounding it. Who knew about it? Who had access to it? And had its secrecy truly remained intact all these years? Reports suggest those concerns intensified after unusual interest was allegedly noticed around records connected to Queen Elizabeth's private archive. On the surface, nothing appeared dramatic. A request for information here. A routine inquiry there. Individually, none of it seemed suspicious. But viewed together, insiders claim the pattern looked very different. Some palace officials reportedly began wondering whether curiosity about the mysterious file had existed long before anyone publicly knew it was there. That possibility immediately triggered quiet discussions behind closed doors. According to sources, senior aides began reviewing archive procedures and examining who had been granted access to certain collections over the years. Internal records were reportedly checked, confidentiality measures revisited, and conversations that once seemed routine suddenly carried far greater importance. The objective wasn't to accuse anyone. It was simply to determine whether Queen Elizabeth's carefully protected instructions had truly remained secure. But the answers reportedly left some officials uneasy. As speculation continued growing, news of the document eventually reached Prince William himself. Sources claim he was privately informed about both the file's existence and the concern surrounding it before wider discussions could take place. For the future king, the discovery reportedly carried enormous emotional weight. This wasn't just another historical record. It was something his grandmother had intentionally prepared for him. Something she had trusted would reach him only when the time was right. After spending a lifetime preparing William for future responsibilities, Queen Elizabeth now seemed to be placing one final obligation into his hands, even after her passing. Yet before William had the opportunity to fully understand the document, debate over its future had already begun. According to palace observers, opinions quickly divided. Some believed the file should remain completely private until its purpose could be fully understood. Others argued that information connected to the future of the monarchy should never remain known to only one individual. Both sides believed they were acting in the institution's best interest. But their disagreements quietly exposed deeper tensions already developing inside the royal household. Caught in the middle of those conversations was Princess Catherine. Several reports suggest she consistently encouraged patience over panic. Rather than reacting emotionally, she reportedly believed every detail should first be carefully understood. After all, the document had remained hidden for years. Waiting a little longer to understand its meaning wouldn't change its importance. Rushing into conclusions, however, certainly could. Her cautious approach became increasingly significant as theories about the document continued multiplying. Every new rumor created another question. Every question fueled another headline. And before long, speculation itself was becoming almost as powerful as the mystery. Palace insiders reportedly worried about one thing above all else. What if Queen Elizabeth's words were misunderstood? What if private guidance intended for one specific situation was interpreted as something entirely different? Or worse? What if personal reflections were mistaken for official instructions? Those concerns quickly became central to every discussion. Because regardless of what the document actually contained, one fact appeared undeniable. Queen Elizabeth had protected it for a reason. The real challenge now wasn't simply opening the file. It was understanding why she wanted it kept hidden until this exact moment. And as anticipation surrounding its contents continued building, one thing became increasingly clear. The greatest surprise wasn't that the document had finally resurfaced. It was what Queen Elizabeth may have written inside. Yet the greatest surprise was never the discovery of the document itself. It was what Queen Elizabeth had allegedly written inside. According to individuals who claimed to be familiar with the sealed file, it was not a formal royal directive or a constitutional instruction. Instead, it was described as something far more personal, a private message from a grandmother to the future king, shaped by more than 7 decades of experience on the throne. Once attention shifted from the mystery of the document to its reported contents, the entire conversation changed. The focus was no longer on who had hidden it or why it had remained sealed. Now, everyone wanted to know what Queen Elizabeth believed was important enough to preserve for William alone. Sources suggest the document contained personal reflections and guidance rather than official orders. It reportedly focused on the challenges William would one day face as king and the values Queen Elizabeth believed were essential to protecting the monarchy in the years ahead. That distinction was significant. Throughout her reign, Elizabeth was never known for dramatic speeches behind closed doors. Instead, she led through consistency, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to duty. According to palace insiders, those same principles formed the heart of her private message. Rather than speaking about privilege or royal status, the document reportedly emphasized responsibility. It reminded William that wearing the crown was never about personal ambition. It was about service, sacrifice, and accepting burdens that few people outside the monarchy could ever truly understand. According to reports, Queen Elizabeth repeatedly stressed that the institution must always come before individual interests. But perhaps the most thought-provoking part of the message involved influence. Sources familiar with the document claim Queen Elizabeth warned William that every future monarch would face competing opinions, competing advice, and competing agendas. Not every challenge would come from outside the palace. Some of the greatest tests would come much closer to home. According to insiders, she encouraged William to carefully distinguish between loyalty to individuals and loyalty to the crown itself. It was a lesson she had learned over decades of service. During her historic reign, Queen Elizabeth witnessed governments change, public opinion evolve, trusted advisors come and go, and family relationships face extraordinary pressure. Yet one truth reportedly remained constant throughout her life. Public trust was the monarchy's greatest strength. Once lost, it could take years, sometimes generations, to rebuild. Sources claim the document urged William never to lose sight of that reality. Every decision, every partnership, every major choice would ultimately be judged by the confidence the public placed in the institution. Those close to royal circles suggest reading the document had a profound emotional impact on William. Rather than feeling like a historical record, it reportedly felt like one final conversation with the grandmother who had quietly prepared him for this responsibility throughout his life. There would be no opportunity to ask questions. Only her words, preserved across time, waiting until the moment she believed he would understand them. According to reports, the message also looked beyond William himself. Queen Elizabeth allegedly spoke about future generations, reminding him that the monarchy was never built for a single reign. It was meant to endure. For George. For Charlotte. For Louis. And for every future heir who would one day inherit the same responsibilities. During this emotional period, Princess Catherine reportedly became one of William's strongest sources of support. While speculation continued outside the palace, insiders claim she encouraged careful reflection instead of rushed decisions. The Queen's message carried enormous significance. But truly understanding it would require patience, wisdom, and perspective. Because William's responsibility was no longer simply about honoring his grandmother's legacy. It was about carrying those lessons forward into a future that remained uncertain. Yet even as he reflected on Queen Elizabeth's words, a new struggle was already beginning behind palace doors. As William continued reflecting on his grandmother's words, another challenge was quietly unfolding behind palace walls. What had begun as a deeply personal family matter was now developing into a wider debate about trust, responsibility, and the future direction of the monarchy. According to palace insiders, the moment news of Queen Elizabeth's hidden document reached a broader circle of senior officials, the atmosphere inside royal circles noticeably shifted. The focus was no longer on simply understanding the document. It was now about deciding what should happen next. Discussions that had once centered on discovery gradually turned into conversations about responsibility. Questions that initially focused on history were now raising concerns about leadership, influence, and the long-term stability of the crown. No one seemed to completely agree on how the document should be handled. According to several reports, different opinions quickly emerged among those closest to the monarchy. Some believed Queen Elizabeth's message should remain exactly as she intended, a private communication meant solely for Prince William. Others argued that if the document contained guidance capable of influencing the future of the monarchy, it should not remain known to only one individual. Neither side questioned Queen Elizabeth's legacy. Instead, both believed they were protecting it in different ways. Because everyone understood what was truly at stake. This wasn't simply about preserving a document. It was about protecting the final wishes of Britain's longest-serving monarch. It was about ensuring that William understood the responsibility placed before him. And above all, it was about safeguarding the institution Queen Elizabeth had dedicated her entire life to serving. As those private conversations continued, another concern quietly emerged. The possibility of leaks. Palace officials reportedly worried that if fragments of the document reached the public without proper context, they could easily be misunderstood. An incomplete sentence, a single paragraph, or even one isolated remark. Any of it could spark headlines that failed to reflect Queen Elizabeth's true intentions. According to insiders, avoiding that outcome quickly became one of the palace's highest priorities. For William, however, sources claim his perspective remained remarkably consistent. Rather than becoming distracted by competing opinions, he reportedly focused on one simple principle: honoring his grandmother's wishes. If Queen Elizabeth had gone to extraordinary lengths to preserve the document until the right moment, William believed he owed it the same level of patience, respect, and careful consideration. Those close to the future king suggest he viewed the document not as a source of authority, but as a personal responsibility entrusted to him by someone who understood the monarchy better than anyone else. Standing beside him throughout this period was Princess Catherine. According to multiple royal observers, she played a steadying role as uncertainty continued growing around the issue. While speculation intensified elsewhere, Catherine reportedly encouraged calm judgment over emotional reaction. She understood that moments of uncertainty had tested the monarchy many times before. Its greatest strength had always been its ability to remain united, even during periods of disagreement. Sources suggest preserving that unity became one of her biggest priorities. At the same time, King Charles reportedly faced a uniquely difficult balancing act. As monarch, he carried responsibilities extending far beyond personal relationships. Every decision had implications not only for his family, but also for the institution itself. According to palace observers, Charles recognized just how sensitive the situation had become. Balancing private loyalties with public duty was never going to be simple. Inside royal circles, uncertainty continued to grow. Some believed the controversy would quietly disappear with time. Others feared its consequences had only just begun. Because regardless of what the document actually contained, its existence had already begun changing conversations inside the palace. Trust was being tested. Old assumptions were being questioned. And long-standing relationships appeared more delicate than ever before. Yet through all the speculation, one question still remained unanswered. Had the full significance of Queen Elizabeth's message truly been understood? Or was its greatest impact still waiting to unfold? Just when it seemed the mystery surrounding Queen Elizabeth's hidden document had reached its peak, the conversation inside royal circles began taking an even more emotional turn. The story was no longer simply about a sealed file. It had become a reflection of Queen Elizabeth's lifelong vision for the monarchy. According to people familiar with the matter, every new detail pointed toward the same conclusion. This was never about protecting a secret. It was about protecting a legacy. Throughout her reign, Queen Elizabeth earned a reputation for looking far beyond the present moment. While others focused on immediate challenges, she was known for preparing years, even decades, ahead. Those who worked closely with her often said she believed the monarchy could only survive if each generation quietly prepared the next before responsibility officially changed hands. Many insiders now believe the hidden document reflected that exact philosophy. Reports suggest the file was never created as a reaction to recent events. Instead, it was part of a much longer plan. A plan built on guidance rather than control. Preparation rather than prediction. Looking back, royal historians have often pointed out that future monarchs rarely begin learning after they inherit the throne. Their education starts much earlier. Experience is shared. Responsibility is introduced gradually. And lessons are passed from one generation to the next. According to palace observers, Queen Elizabeth understood this better than anyone. The document reportedly represented the final stage of that lifelong process. What made it remarkable was not necessarily the words written inside. It was what those words represented. Trust. Not institutional trust. Personal trust. A grandmother placing her confidence in the grandson she believed would one day lead the crown into an entirely new era. Sources suggest every page focused less on giving instructions and more on sharing perspective. Rather than telling William exactly what to do, Queen Elizabeth reportedly offered lessons shaped by decades of triumphs, crises, and difficult decisions. She wasn't attempting to lead from beyond her lifetime. She was passing forward experience that no official handbook could ever teach. According to those close to royal circles, that realization deeply affected William. Over time, the document reportedly became more than a historical keepsake. It became a personal responsibility. Instead of looking backward at Queen Elizabeth's reign, William found himself looking ahead toward his own future. The expectations suddenly felt more real. The responsibility heavier. According to those closest to the story, that philosophy remained at the heart of everything she left behind. Even after her passing, her influence continues to shape the future of the royal family. Not because of titles. Not because of power. But because of the principles she believed should outlive every reign. For William, the document reportedly became far more than a historical keepsake. It became a reminder that the greatest responsibility of a monarch is not preserving privilege. It is preserving trust. And as he looks toward the future, carrying both the honor and burden of one day becoming king, one lesson appears to stand above all the others. The most valuable inheritance Queen Elizabeth ever left behind was never measured by palaces, crowns, or royal authority. It was measured by service. By integrity. By responsibility. Because in the end, monarchs may change. Generations may come and go. Public controversies will eventually fade. But duty remains. And if the reports surrounding Queen Elizabeth's private message are true, that may ultimately become the greatest legacy she entrusted to Prince William. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, thanks for watching.